When you need to build up your team to handle the growing chaos at work, use Indeed Sponsored Jobs. It gives your job post the boost it needs to be seen and helps reach people with the right skills, certifications, and more. Spend less time searching and more time actually interviewing candidates who check all your boxes. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. That's Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need a hiring hero? This is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs.
If you've been dreaming about a place where life feels a little more intentional, discover the Canopy in Sebastopol by City Ventures. This new community offers solar-powered homes, surrounded by mature trees, nature preserves, and walking trails, with a vibrant local downtown, renowned wineries, and the Bay Area all within easy reach. Enjoy low-maintenance living, refined design, and built-in eco-friendly features that make everyday life easier. Start your next chapter at the Canopy by City Ventures. Visit cityventures.com. That's cityventures.com.
Hello and welcome back to the Cardiff Central podcast. My name's Dan, and we interrupt our summer break from podcasting to bring you a special guest episode to start up the 2026-27 season a little bit earlier. I'm about to be joined, I'm recording this afterwards, but from in the past, I'm about to be joined by Martyn Ryan, obviously long-time director of the club and involved in the Hollywood consortium that was possibly buying the club at points last season. We had a good discussion on Welsh Rugby generally, what's happened at Cardiff over the last year or so, and what he thinks the future might hold for the club. Mention at the end, but we will be back to proper programming at some point in the middle of August. But until then, enjoy this guest episode. Joining me is Martyn Ryan. Martyn, thank you very much for coming on. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Enjoying the warm weather.
Yes.
I do like warm weather, unlike most people I meet.
No, it is. It has been a good few weeks of summer, certainly. I thought we'd start the podcast. Just, I think, majority of listeners, particularly over the course of the last season, will be aware of you, of course, with the lots of ongoings with the potential sale of the club and the consortium that you were heading up. But obviously, your connection with the club goes back a long way, and with London Welsh as well. So, what's your sort of life in rugby been for you?
Okay, well, probably start that. I mean, I was born in Cardiff, born in St David's Hospital. Lived in Ely and Fairwater till I was about 10, and then my parents moved to Penarth. So went to the grammar school in Penarth, played rugby there, played rugby for Cardiff schools, under 17s, under 19s, by sixth form. Then went away to college. University in Southampton, played there, played for Hampshire, and moved with work up to London. So started playing for London Welsh and played sort of Druids, Dragons, which is the second or third team for London Welsh, until I was about 30, 35. And then became the club's treasurer in the mid-90s, this was. Did that for a number of years, but London Welsh raised money from the public in 96, and my career was just taking off and the workload was just too great. So I stepped down from the treasurer's role at London Welsh, although I was still involved with the ground, the partnership and that sort of thing. And I then rejoined or joined the board of London Welsh in 2012, because we thought that, or there was the rumors that the benefactors were going to pull out, and we were looking at how we might manage the club going forward. And the season after I joined the board, we recruited Lynn Jones and Kingsley Jones as coaches. John Taylor became chief executive. Steve Lewis, sort of director of rugby. And we got promoted, much to everybody's surprise, particularly Bristol's, who beat us 3 times out of the 4 times we faced them in the season, but got knocked out in the semi-finals of the playoffs and didn't get it. But we got promoted, which and we had a fantastic first season. The club moved out to Oxford to play. We had a really very good, courtesy of Steve, particularly, really very good recruitment profile. Bearing in mind, our promotion had been blocked by the RFU because we were sharing the ground with Oxford. We challenged that and won the challenge because a number of other sides were playing at that time at football grounds and didn't have primacy. So that was set aside. So we were recruiting very late, but fortunately, a couple of clubs had got bust, France and Italy, and we recruited fantastic players. We had a French international loosehead who we were paying £40,000 a year to. So, yeah, compared to today's prices, and we had a great season. We beat Exeter, we beat Bath, beat London Irish twice. Had players like Gavin Henson played for us, but too small a squad, a record-keeping problem, and we ended up getting relegated. And it was about at that time I was coming to the end of my career, and I'd enjoyed being involved in professional rugby, enjoyed it a great deal, and so thought about how I could expand that, really, because it looked as if London Welsh were going to be moving back to a sort of semi-pro basis, which was a route I favoured, but the owner wanted to do something different, and unfortunately it ended in tears a couple of years later. I stepped aside, so I approached through a couple of friends, Peter Thomas, Richard Holland, about joining the board in Cardiff. We met a couple of times, got on pretty well, and so that was my introduction to Cardiff. So I joined the board 2013, 2014, and was on the board until the company went into administration. Was it 15 months ago?
Yeah.
So that was the link.
What did you, when you joined Cardiff at that time, 2013, 14, obviously it was kind of, I suppose, just at the start of the time of where professional rugby in Wales was properly going through a bit of a challenge with the WRU and that relationship. And
yeah.
What did you find when you
turned up at there are a couple of things here. I joined it at the peak because I actually, it was 2013 because it was the summer that the British Lions went to Australia.
Yeah.
And Gethin Jenkins couldn't go because he was injured. But, it's Sam, Lee Halfpenny, Jamie Roberts, Alex Cuthbert. So, we Cardiff, and it was a couple of years after we'd won in Marseille. Jamie would just left to go to, Racing. So it was, it was all looking pretty positive. Slightly disillusioned when one of the first European games I went to, we played Exeter away and we were 30-odd points down at half time, having four test Lions on the field. But we came back well in the second half, etc. And the weekend after that, we beat Toulon in Cardiff. So yeah, look, it was certainly, I certainly viewed it as the way to get out at a senior club level. Also, we at London Welsh had quite a few battles with the RFU over various things, and the union there with the real battles with Roger Lewis were starting because the benefactors, Peter Thomas, Mike James, Rob Davis, guys at Newport, guys had started to reduce their input, or a number of them had, and were battling over finances. So there was, there was quite a lot of what's the best word? Well, I mean, it was debate, it was argument over how it went forward. And it was difficult times. And of course, Lee Anthony left shortly after, and the results were starting to slip a bit. And they were not easy times, and it certainly wasn't quite the side that I'd expected. But by then I'd sort of got under my skin. I mean, a lot of I played schoolboy rugby with Ian Eidman, Owen Golding, a lot of those players of that sort of early 80s side. And you met them at the club, and Chris Collins I played with. So a lot of old friends, and everybody made me very welcome. And some new friends, people like Paul Bailey, John Hugh Williams, who taught me in school. So there's a lot of interaction with. Well, actually didn't teach me, coach me in school. With a lot of interaction with people around the club. I just really enjoyed it, frankly. I mean, it really, I really just enjoyed, going. We'd moved back to the Arms Park, obviously, by then.
Yeah.
So the atmosphere was good. The away trips were great. Meeting a lot of the sponsors, and I mean, really, really enjoyed it.
And obviously, there's been a number of then subsequent battles. Roger, and then Martyn Phillips, his WRU coming into the
Martyn wasn't a battle.
No.
Martyn was the battle. We very much agreed with most of what the problem that Martyn had, and Gareth had as well. I mean, Magic then, was that they couldn't get what they wanted to achieve through the board. You remember at the time the board was very dominated by the clubs, and it was the sort of reforms that took place 2 or 3 years ago were very similar to the reforms that Gareth and Martyn put forward in 2017, 2018. And so, but they didn't get through at the time. And, eventually, I mean, I don't know the precise reasons behind Martyn leaving. He'd been there. He'd been there a while, but I suspect frustration was part of it, that he couldn't put through all the changes he wanted. And so, and then there was another series of battles with Steve Phillips and the board, and so that was those times difficult. But Martyn Phillips certainly was. If you look at the Project Reset model, certainly the initial one, which ultimately didn't get through, very positive, and we were all broadly in line with them. I mean, inevitably, there are bits and pieces of difference on any strategy like that, but we broadly would agree with them.
So I suppose the question was like going to be around, has there been like an improvement with that relationship with the WRU at any point? Or has it sort of fluctuated via different regimes at the top there from your perspective?
Yes, I mean, it has fluctuated. I think, I mean, clearly everybody, the number of times I've been told where everybody wants to do the best in the best interests of Welsh rugby, and people have different views. We're currently waiting to see what the union's methods will be of getting to their, the strategic aim of only having three professional sides. I mean, I think that is still the stated aim. And that inevitably is, poses some difficulties. They've also added to that reduction a very different model where they're taking much more control, if not total control, of the rugby side of the business, taking control of the academy and pathways, which I think is difficult. Is difficult for an investor to stomach, really, because ultimately those rugby decisions are going to drive the commercial aspects of the club. I'm sure there will be lots and lots of caveats and contracts and things put together, but were the strategic direction of the side to change, were it to be appropriate for one of the remaining professional sides to become a development side, then the commercial aspects of the thing go completely out of the window. So it's that's a difficult negotiation, and you're going, and we know we've seen the friction, and we've seen the reaction of fans, and we've seen the owners of the Dragons, their view is very public of the degree of control that they're comfortable with. I don't think it'd be surprised to think that the Scarlets board have the same view, and I'm sure Y11 would share similar views as well. I mean, you've got we just talking about our consortium. We were probably more able to live with some of that because we came from an approach of a slightly different way. But you had to have, if you're asking people to invest over a 10-year period, then you have to have influence at the very least over rugby matters. I think a lot of the ideas in the pathway are about the pathway and development are good, and it's good to see for the first time in my experience the union really focusing on providing and dedicating resources to build a high performance structure. I think my own view is it loses a bit of the contact within the clubs, which is very important for development. If you talk to people like Sam or Josh Navidi, coming in to train alongside Martin Williams and Zav Rush and Tito and all those sorts of guys, Ken Jenkins, whatever, was a big part of their their development. And I to me, and we had one presentation during the bid process. To me, there's an element of that was missing. I also think there's a lot of good stuff going on. It's not coordinated and brought together, but there's a lot of good stuff, and I think we should be building on that a bit more. But I think the fact that we're investing is the right thing.
Just away from sort of the model that the WRU have proposed and just the general idea of 4-3, what is your sort of view on, because obviously it's the debate that's sort of drawn out the most emotion over the last year, and particularly around supporters of the Ospreys and the Scarlets, where I think the threat is probably most felt in terms of a team going. But
it's the direction of travel that the union were putting out there was, east, central, west. There is only one side in the east. There is only one side in the centre. So, two into one has got to, is their view of what they want to happen in the west.
Do you agree with that? Do you see where they're coming from, though, with the drop into
Well,
three teams?
just step back a second. In April 2017, in the announcement of our Cardiff's annual results, I had a piece in Wales Online saying that we could only afford two competitive sides. Now, at that point, it was the sort of the so-called 2+2 model, with two full fat and two semi-skim. So I think there has. Sorry, we're talking slightly offline about investment. If in order to generate the private investment that is needed for the model to succeed, and there are various estimates, but people have talked 25-30 million pounds over 10 years of private investment, potentially as much as that. Then you have to. I think nowadays you have to show a return. I mean, the days of the benefactors ploughing money in to support the sides are gone, and we need to address that. And so, in principle, I know we haven't seen all the numbers. We haven't seen a full analysis of the union's accounts and whether the finances and this is necessary. But I mean, so many people who have, say that, the whole board say that. So I wonder whether actually, and it's an idea that's been put to me by some other people, going to two, one in the east, one in the west, and a much stronger sort of Super Rugby Cymru, which is, with more investment in coaching and in players. So it's so that you've got, let's say you have 80 full-time professionals at the two clubs, but strong, but a very strong group outside that, of a mix of young players and experienced players. The other thing is you've got to have a pathway to catch the late developer. There are people do develop late. Liam Williams is probably the best example, but that does happen, and we have to be in a position to capture that, as well as, I think, I've never had a worry about. Worry's the wrong word, but we obviously we've had an interesting relationship with Pontypridd, but it was never a problem to me that they were, the attitudes that they had towards God, because it meant that there was, in the north of the geographical area, I hate calling it a region, the geographical area that we're responsible for, there was a rugby side and a mission that attracted kids to play. And I think to go back to that, to have whatever the eight sides would be, would be, I think that would be a good way of developing out into the community, which I think has been lost a little bit.
I suppose the response to saying into two teams, I think one point that would be made would just be around how many players are playing week in, week out to that top level. Then obviously you got 46 across the 223s every week. Is something like that, and that's a debate about going from 4 to 3 as well. Is that just reflective of where we are now, basically?
I think it's I think it's I think it is a bit of a reflection of where we are. If you think about the number of genuine international quality players that we have in Wales. I mean, we had what? We had two lions, two lions in the summer, and a couple on the fringe. But well, that's what's that? 20% of Leinster.
Yeah.
I don't see. Well, I suppose the problem is, and this is why 3 may be better than 2. How do you go back? How do you expand within the framework? I mean, I in my article in 2017, I quoted the NFL, which is a franchise system, has expanded and added sides. I think in the current league structures, that's very difficult. Not impossible, but difficult. But who knows if you had the growth. We have to remember that we are a small nation, and the numbers of players that we have is unlike, or will occasionally produce a sort of golden generation. I mean, if you look at, I'm sure we must have done it at some point in the in the mid 2015, 2018, we must have put out a team of 15 Test Lions. Now, or very, very close to. Now that's that is unusual in a group. Now, people will argue, well, Leinster, Ireland have done that. What we have to do, and I think which is one thing that the development side is heading, is that sort of hothouse condition where through the clubs into the private schools, into the Leinster, Munster frameworks, you have to create that, and that requires significant investment. And then let's not forget, the game in Ireland is very different. If you want to go and watch Leinster play a European Cup match, it's a 65, 75 euro ticket. Plus, you've got sponsors, national champions, that are prepared to sponsor, plus a government which is significantly wealthy, has large budget surpluses, so can afford to invest in both development and stadia. So, and we don't have any of that. I mean, the Welsh government provides as much support as it can, I suppose, but it really is very little in comparison. And even the COVID loans, were much smaller than other nations. So you need that management, you need that alignment and that investment, and we have to get there because clearly, what has been happening hasn't had the effect that we'd hoped. I mean, the national side is clearly getting stronger, but I think we saw 2 weeks ago that there's still some way to go to be competing within that top echelon.
On that growth point of the game and where you might find growth in the club level in Wales, there's a lot of chat about, obviously always about Anglo-Welsh leagues and the URC and where the clubs are playing week in, week out. Is it worth having that chat, do you think, about like the aim to get into the Anglo-Welsh League, or is it we're in the URC, we try and make the most of where we are now?
I think you do both. You do both. I mean, there is no doubt that the biggest strategic mistake Welsh Rugby has made, and there have been some pretty big ones. But the biggest one is refusing to enter the English league. You've got the largest rugby market in the world, certainly at the time. Maybe arguably France is bigger now, but on your doorstep, and you chose not to join it. And it would have provided more funding. I mean, so I don't think it's a total panacea, because it also depends what you do with it. But it would certainly have been provided work for, and there's a lot. I mean, we obviously I was in London Welsh were in the Premiership, and there was a lot of talk then about becoming the 5th club and in Wales and all that sort of stuff. There is certainly an enthusiasm, particularly amongst the sides, or the majority of the sides around the Severn Bridge, for competition with Welsh sides to start up again. It's a fiendishly complicated thing to do. And the legal issues around it, the approvals that are needed, are very difficult to obtain, and there's going to be a lot of obtain. But there's no reason why that shouldn't be an objective. But to get there and to compete there, you have to have well-funded sides that have got sustainability. The last thing, living up in London, having gone through with people the trauma of Wasps collapsing. London Irish, whose ground is about 800 yards from my house, so I was a member and a season ticket holder. I actually played for the Irish for a season way back when. But the scars that has left on the league, there's no way that they're accepting in sides that aren't completely sustainable and have been tested. So that isn't going to happen until all of this. You can have conversations. So I say you can do both. You can becoming stronger, becoming more sustainable, serves both masters.
On just going back to Cardiff then, obviously you mentioned the last 15 months or so have been a bit of change after going into administration, then coming out in WRU ownership. Obviously you've been involved as part of that consortium that was in the running to buy the club. I'm aware that obviously, you were obviously bound by some elements that you can't speak on there. But just what have you made of how the WRU have handled sort of the sale, and do you think that it was the right thing to rush straight back into private ownership, or whether they maybe could have waited and put these systemic changes in place across Welsh Rugby first? I don't know if there's something you might have done differently, perhaps if you were the Welsh Rugby Union taking over control of Cardiff back in April last year.
That's an interesting point, actually, which I must admit I hadn't really thought about. I think, having gone through the period of time when the Dragons were owned, owning one side creates a lot of problems, a lot of issues. Doesn't mean they can't be solved, doesn't mean they can't be dealt with, but it throws up a lot of questions. And as we know, the Ospreys and the Scarlets, refused to sign the PRA 25, and there was litigation resulting. So I think it's a. And don't forget also, at the time, the strategy was 4 sides. 4 sides was the only way to build enough players to play an international game, and 3 sides was too few, and there'd be too few people playing and everything else. So there was a very definite 4-side strategy. And I suppose in that context, then stabilizing the club, by giving it a 2-year guarantee and that sort of thing, and then looking for new owners was a rational part of that foresight strategy, because there's no doubt. I mean, there was a lot of friction over, during the period that the Dragons were owned by the Union. So I think it was probably the right thing to do. And look, I mean, we were a new consortium and needed to raise funds, looking to bid for the club. Y11 had, despite the complexities of owning two sides, but they'd owned and run the Ospreys, so they had management experience. They had funded the Ospreys, and there've been some big cash calls, £1 million plus a year. They funded that. They've got a venture capital backer in Malaysia with significant funds, so they've got the money in the bank, and they run successfully a number of other sporting events. So, inevitably, the Union is going to be risk averse. You've just seen a side collapse. Inevitably, they're going to minimize risk, and by some distance, they were the low risk option. A lot less fun, but also,
Well, that builds into a question I had though about, like, does Welsh Rugby need to be more innovative in that sense? Like the consortium represented something very different around
absolutely. In my mind, to my mind, absolutely. I mean, I think what we had in mind, and it's I mean, look at the quality of the people that were there as well. These were very, very serious players. And they really got enthusiastic about it. And I'm disappointed in myself that I didn't present our case better. I think that made it easier for the Union to make a decision in favour of the YLM, even though I think, for what I've said, all that conservative risk avoidance and their track record, was always going to be very difficult to overturn. I think it does. Clearly it does. And clearly we presented something. I mean, we were talking about a scripted TV show about Cardiff, which featured the club, because, as most people know, Mark Williams, who's going to be the creative guy, wrote Ozark, which is quite dark, and obviously we were going to be writing. He was going to be writing something similar, in similar vein, about Cardiff. And so you couldn't have it all taking place at the club. You couldn't have a drug dealer, in the backroom staff or whatever. So it was going to be off to one side, and would feature the club and would generate public publicity. And we had an incredibly talented designer. So the merchandise, they were really excited about the merchandise. I mean, I remember Niels came down to Cardiff, and we went in the trophy room, and we went to the shop, and things like the skull and crossbones, were just really exciting marketing opportunities. Now, Wrexham sold 500,000 replica kits last year. 250,000 in the US. But we need something like that. We need that we've got to expand the sources of revenue. We as I said earlier, you've got we saw the ticket yields that we get are not going to be enough. Are not just not going to be enough to get us to where we need to go. So you need to be and frankly, in my view, the URC TV contract is awful.
Yeah.
Quite why they chose to split it up in the way they did and lose Sky. I mean, Sky presented it really well. So so you've got a very you really. I mean, the guys were stunned by the poverty of the presentation of the club game.
Yeah. What from your outside view of that Y11 bid, then when they become the preferred bid, obviously it subsequently, I don't know, collapsed is the right word or just didn't progress. But what do you think happened there? What's your theory on why they didn't ultimately go, and maybe what you thought they might have been trying to achieve by owning both clubs as well?
I honestly don't know. So I'm really repeating press speculation, which I think makes sense. I mean, it was always quite a stretch to justify some of the valuations. Whether that became an issue, I don't know. It was complicated, obviously, because of the rules around one owner of two sides. And there was quite a lot of work needed to be done around that. And concessions and how that would work through. There's a lot of cost involved in closing down a club. When we had previous conversations with the Ospreys about some sort of tie-up, the debt was always a problem, and having enough, two lots of debt with one lot of income to service it. So I think it was just a lot of difficult challenges. And if you take emotion out of these things and you're just purely looking on an economic basis, I suspect at some point it just didn't quite add up.
Is that what you think would have happened, though, with closing a club down? You think ultimately that they would have used that path to go from 4 to 3 using Y11, closing one of the two teams or merging them?
I mean, I think it was. I think that yes. I mean, I think that would have been the way you got to one side in the West, wouldn't it?
Obviously Y11 were like quite briefing quite heavily that it was going to be two teams carrying on, and that they were prepared to be the owner of both teams.
They can't carry on with they cannot carry on with two teams. World Rugby URC rules don't allow it. Now they can have a transition period, but none of the other clubs are going to accept the fact that there's one side owned by two sides owned by the same person. So I think there was an interim agreement, certainly, and I think that I guess what I'm guessing, because even while the negotiations were carrying on, they got behind the St Helens project. What I'm guessing is that there would have been a glide path in Swansea down to the Ospreys playing a Swansea RFC out of St Helens. I think it would have had to be.
Yeah.
But I mean, strange things happen in rugby politics. But I think there's certainly a plan to keep the Ospreys afloat for. Not least because there's a massive URC penalty for dropping a side out, which is one of the primary reasons for keeping Cardiff alive, because the contracts do envisage a situation where one side fails and the other three carry on. Not mandatory, but it's that's a possible. There's a way of doing that.
At the point WRU with the WRU and Y11 negotiations did cease, I think supporters will be interested to know whether there was any discussion with yourselves and your consortium about coming back in.
No contact whatsoever.
Nothing. Would you have been in a position to come back in? Were you interested at that point still?
We had conversations about doing that, and we made it clear that we would be interested, but there was no interest from the union in doing that.
So obviously at the time they released a statement saying that it wasn't going to be sold to Y11, and I think the wording was something like the WRU will retain ownership of Cardiff for the foreseeable future or something like that. What do you think that this next few years looks like for Cardiff? Because from our point of view as supporters, there's been no detail in terms of how long that foreseeable future is, and also what they plan to do with the club for the next, I suppose, maybe 2 to 3 years is a foreseeable future.
Well, you know it's at least 2 years. So, I think, we'll know a lot more when the strategic plan is announced. Logically, you're going to have a side in the capital city, but equally logically, you'd have a side in Swansea as the second biggest commercial base, and Newport is the third, and whatever. So I think we know that they're looking to recruit a CEO, and hopefully, but how that's going, I have no idea. I think the management team, Scott and Jamie, have done a really good job in very difficult circumstances. So I would hope that they would be. I think Scott will, be involved as chair, and I hope Jamie would carry on as CEO, because I think it's hard to underestimate just how difficult this season has been, and what's been happening off the field. Somebody was explaining to me that I won't say who, but it didn't matter for the senior players because they were always going to get a contract. Well, good luck with that, boys. I think you saw that, it does matter by the near strike, but also more importantly, you look at our group of players coming through. You look at Mason Grady and all, and Cam Winnett and all these guys have come through school, academy, and okay, they've done well. They're in the first team. They're going to be retained. Their mates are playing in the academy, coming through, are the squad members who are on the fringe of the squad, who are the boys who are probably going to lose their job, and of course that affects them all. They're part of a group. They're all thinking about it. It's unsettling. It's not a good place to be. And I think the guys did, to come sixth in the URC it's a remarkable achievement. The coaching and losing our head coach just before the season started. It's almost as if somebody was trying to trip us up. But no, but people have done remarkably well, and that deserves to be recognised, and it has been in the coaching team, obviously, and hopefully it will be with the management and all the people as well. I go down to the club a lot, and it's been one of the things that kept me involved. There's so many good people around.
Yeah.
You talk to I had a drink with Danny Wilson and Matt Sherratt just before the Barbarians game. And they're still, they would love to still be involved with Cardiff and in some role and work it out. They all really enjoyed their time. Really, it's a rugby town, isn't it? Yeah. A lot of rugby towns.
Uh, the consortium at the moment, what's the state of play for you guys? Are you still sort of in contact and lurking just in case?
Yeah. We're still talking. I mean, I think, yeah, we're still talking. They're still working on thinking on the TV show and some other possible TV assets connected with it. But like everybody else, we don't know where we are. It's been a long time now, and they're all entrepreneurs in with their own businesses. So you can't keep hanging on.
Yeah.
You can't keep, they put a lot of effort in to, finding sponsors, selling naming rights, building up preparations for the shows, thinking about the merchandising, and it's a big distraction. And they've got their own pretty sizable organizations, but you can't just keep on doing that at the expense of stuff that could well lead nowhere.
And for you personally, I know you mentioned it in a Wales Online interview relatively recently. You were still hoping to be involved in the game somehow. What does sort of the future look like for you and your links to Cardiff or to Welsh Rugby?
Well, I have to say nothing on the cards at the moment. I've got the Old Penarthians AGM coming up in August. I'm chairman of the board of the company at the Old Penarthians. So I've still got an involvement there. I'm a patron down at London Welsh. I'd like to do something if I could. Obviously there are a couple of jobs up for grabs at the moment, so I'm sort of making myself available, but I don't know. I don't know.
Just from a supporter perspective, then Cardiff, obviously you mentioned that the number of young players and how well we've done last season. As already attention starts turning to next season and 2026-27, a return to the Champions Cup and the 150th season. What do you make
Absolutely.
of where we are at the moment?
Well, look, I mean, I think one of the big pleasure, one of the big joys has been the European fixtures. I've always been a firm admirer of French rugby and the Europe. I thought the European competitions were great. We had some great European nights. I mean, I was at university in Boston when we beat Toulon, and finding the local Welsh community and knocking them up at getting them in the bar at 9 o'clock in the morning and with some very rudimentary streaming and going nuts when we won. So I think they're great. And even the year we played Toulouse and Racing and Bath and Harlequins, and the whole trauma of the the guys out in isolation and taking the lead against Toulouse at home with Josh Adams going over one of the great moments and the really good game against Bath. That's where we want to be, right? So that's who we want to play. I mean, with the greatest respect, I don't want to go to Romania. I mean, I don't mind going to Romania, but but this is this is where we aspire to be at that, playing in those competitions. And as I say, to come sixth, it's fantastic. It'd be brilliant if we could do it again. I mean, it's going to be tough. Undoubtedly, it's going to be tough. But if we could get another qualification, then that's another building step, isn't it? I'm sure, I don't know, but I'm speculating strongly that some of the recruitments we've made has been in has been as a result of playing in European competition. It's not hugely profitable. It's bloody ridiculous, really. It's ridiculous, really. You don't. I was talking to our old friend Reece Blumberg, and you get to a quarter final of a Challenge Cup, you play away, and it costs you money to play. I mean, it's madness. It is madness. They need rapid total reorganization. But no, I think it's good. And hopefully, I mean, the players will all be a year older. I hope Theo Capayo comes back.
Yeah.
He's had a long time out. I know, because a couple of the med guys stayed with me when he was having one of his operations, a really serious injury, and he's had a lot of rehab. And I just really hope he's successful. I've seen that he's been in training. We'll see how he goes. But the young guys coming through. I think we've recruited quite sensibly. We'd like to recruit more. But this is where you get into a problem with being owned by the union.
Yeah.
They're not going to take. They can't, because they've got to treat them. They've got to be cognizant of everybody else. They can't say, well, actually, we think another $750,000 on the Cardiff budget would really be transformational. So, let's do that. Or we could get investors to come. They can't do that. So that's just one of the issues.
A final question then, just to close off the pod, as it is the 150th season, we're asking any guests that come on the same question, just sort of finish it. What makes Cardiff Rugby Club so special to you?
I was going to be very glib and say, well, it's the greatest. It's not the greatest. I mean, we're not the greatest. I mean, it's just, I've grown up with it. I remember, because although I was living in Penarth, we'd have the Barbarians on the Good Friday, the Barbarians game on the Saturday, and seeing world-class talent really turn up. I remember the year that Danny Herber, who nobody had an idea who he was, coming and playing for the Barbarians, and Errol Tobias. I think it's part of it is it's it's internationalism, if that's a word. It's just it's very representative of the city. I think it has certain standards that are great, and I say just growing up with it, feeling comfortable in it, and when we have a big night, that's a great place to be. I can remember coming in. They always used to be on a Wednesday night because we played English clubs at the weekend and local derbies, and coming to a game against Pontypool in the mid-70s. I mean, amazing atmosphere. So, but I think it's just, I don't think there's one particular thing. It's just the sense of the place.
Yeah. That's great. Well, Martyn, thank you very much for your time today. Greatly appreciated by myself and the supporters. We'll be back on the podcast, regular programming in a few weeks, building up to the new season. But until then, thank you very much for listening, and we will catch you soon. Goodbye.
Okay.